Their kids, and they can be our background.
Impress everybody. Watch out. She'll be back and thump you on the head here.
And he's how long about it?
You got a minute to
What's the fastest I've ever seen you move?
7 seconds.
You're fine.
You want me to call the ambulance?
Nope. Nope. Just the defibrillator thing out.
All right, you ready? Dr. Bruce, you ready? That's good. All right. Welcome everyone to Hewitt, Texas, the City Council regular meeting, August 15th, 2022 at 7 p.m. The meeting is being held at Hewitt City Hall, 200 Patriot Court, Hewitt, Texas, 76643. All members are here tonight, including Dr. Bruce remotely, so that gives us a declaration of a quorum and a call to order. If you'll please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. All right, as we go here, under the public comments, the City Council invites citizens to speak on any topic not already scheduled for a public hearing. The Texas Open Meetings Act prohibits the council from discussing, responding to, or acting on any comments or items not properly posted on the agenda. Members of the public who wish to speak must complete a public comment form and present to the city secretary before the meeting. Olivia, do you have anybody tonight?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
on the special presentations, is that
Oh, this typo, we can
that's
skip
not
over
for
that. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, sir. But thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, under the public hearing and related action, number 3. The public hearing and action on resolution number 2022-08, approving a request for a special permit for an electrical substation located at the northeast corner of Spring Valley Road and North Old Temple Road, as prescribed in Part 4 of Appendix A zoning code of ordinances of the city of Hewitt. Before we go into the public hearing, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. You do have this recommended request for a special permit recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Mr. Mayor, for any action taken by council this evening, be appropriate to open a public hearing regarding this particular measure and ask to receive both comments for and against.
Okay, thank you. All right, at 7:02, open the public hearing on resolution 2022-08. Calling for anybody that wishes to speak in favor, if you would please come to the podium, state your name and address, please. Yes, sir.
Evening, Council. My name is Rob Myers. I'm with Kimley Horn. My address is 6160 Warren Parkway in Frisco, Texas. I am here on behalf of Encore and this electric substation project at Old Temple and Spring Valley. Originally, as you mentioned in the work session, we had a 7-foot tall chain link fence and 2 drives accessing off of Spring Valley. Talking with neighbors at the P&Z Council Commission, we agreed to, instead of the chain link fence, installing an 8-foot tall masonry wall with decorative evergreen shrubs planted every 8 to 10 feet on centers around the perimeter. Talking with TxDOT, we are removing the southern drive that connects to Spring Valley and only using that northern drive to access both the gates. If there are any questions from council, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Anybody have any questions for the gentleman?
Yes.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
A couple of things that I'd like to talk to you about, Mr. Myers. This substation, it's a substation, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It doesn't generate any power.
Correct.
It simply takes power from that main line that's coming down Old Temple Road already and reduces and redistributes.
That's correct. So
Okay.
Yes.
Yep, okay. Does it make any, are there any noises associated with this substation?
I have a representative from Encore that would have better insight into those kind of questions, if you would.
Yeah, hi. My name is Seth Sampson. Can you hear me? Good. All right, my name's Seth Sampson. I'm the siting specialist with Encore Electric. So any of our zoning, public hearing, permitting projects that we have with Encore, I handle those. So in regards to noise, there's, the general hum of like transmission line, it's not as loud as the transmission line would be. Again, it doesn't generate any electricity, but we're required also to follow any type of noise ordinances or anything that the city would have. And typically when we have measured substation sound essentially at our property line, in most communities, it's not able to travel further than the property line. I'm not sure what year specific or if you have noise ordinances, but they're all built the same, so it's not like we turn it up or down, but we're required to follow whatever ordinances you have on that.
Okay. The other question is in regard to safety. The masonry wall is definitely going to add, I would imagine, to add some levels of safety that a chain link wall would not, a chain link fence would not have. Somebody wouldn't be able to climb up, putting a foot in the fence and.
Yeah, that's right. And they're monitored as well. So it's not something that we've ever had really issues with people like breaking into a substation or jumping a fence at a substation.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Anybody else have any comments or questions? I'll call on you, Dr. Bruce. Did you have anything you wanted to ask?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. If none, I think on that, Mr. Myers. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll call for anybody else that wishes to speak for the resolution number 2022-08. If you'll please come to the podium. Nobody else for. I'll call for anybody to speak against the resolution. If you'd like to come to the podium. Yes, sir.
My name's Robert Lopez. I live at 101 Briar Ridge, and I'm here to pitch a NIMBY fuss, okay? In as much as it's better than some things that could go in there, it's still going to affect property values right there on our street. And I'm concerned about electromagnetic interference. I just cut the cable, so to speak, got rid of Spectrum, went with T-Mobile. Okay, my T-Mobile is over the air. What guarantees am I going to have that they're not going to put my internet service out? And also television reception, same thing. I got rid of Spectrum, put up my antenna, and I fought to find a good spot. What are you going to do to us regarding EMI? And what guarantees do we have that we're going to have the things that we've been working for to enjoy if you should produce EMI? Now, I was the instrumentation engineer at the Joint Electromagnetic Interference Joint Task Force. So I was considered a subject matter expert on electromagnetic interference. I also worked at Bonneville Power Administration. We staged out of a 500-yard. And I know that all it takes is one little loose screw to have spurious emissions that will knock out my service.
And just, you'll get a rebuttal here in just a second. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ms. Lopez. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll do a rebuttal back, but before we do that, does anybody else have anything they wish to say in regards against? Yes, sir.
So I don't really know much about the scope, what kind of a substation
I'm
this
sorry,
is.
sir. I'm
Oh, my
sorry.
name's Kurt Case.
Thank you, Kurt.
I live on 105 Briar Ridge.
Thank you,
Which
sir.
backs right up.
Thank you.
I don't know the dimensions of this thing, how close it's gonna be to my home. I too am concerned about transmission or reception. And I do have some, I know there's no real evidence, cause and effect in terms of health concerns, but there's certainly a lot of anecdotal evidence because I have to live there. It's not like I'm driving by it. And I didn't choose to live by this. You guys are choosing it. That's my problem. And I'm probably going to be selling the place for other reasons, but I'm concerned about property values. It's pretty well known. Not too many people want to live next to one of these.
Okay. Yes, sir. Continue on if you have anything else.
I think that's it for now.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments against?
I thought something else.
1 second, please. Yes, sir, you'll get that chance. For a rebut, if anybody, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jeannie Pasaluco. I live at 137 East Chapman. You guys are trying to put this high-powered substation in a very populated area. There's no question that it's not going to affect it won't affect our assessments because the state won't let it. But people are not going to be buying these houses. I live far enough away. I'm not that close. I am, but I'm not as close as these people are here. And I'm upset. There's too much. We had TXU, and we had digging for 5G. And I'm going to tell you, it's terrible. Nothing was fixed right. Nothing was done right. This isn't a highly populated area. You've got a piece of land right out here that the old council, you can't put anything on there. They were looking into a solar farm. Put it out there. It's not going to affect, there's nothing around it. You've got an empty piece of land out there. Use that, utilize that piece for something useful, I guess you could say, because there's no solar farm going out there. But keep it away from the houses. I mean, you gotta understand, people are not. There's new houses. Your city manager lives right out there. He lives right by there. These people are not going to be spending this kind of money on houses with a substation sitting right in their front yard or their backyard. So stop and think about the citizens before you decide that this is what you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak against? Mr. Lopez.
Yes, a few days ago, I was talking with Kurt there in the front yard, and I looked towards the cul-de-sac, and they kind of cleared the field there. I could see I-35 from where I was standing. Now, it would seem that the reason they're needing to upgrade power in the area is for all those developments that are going in on the other side of Spring Valley from us. People have to be served from somewhere. But wouldn't it be more reasonable to put it over there close to I-35, an area that's already blighted, and not ruin our property values?
I'm going to, Kurt, Mr. Lopez, and Ms. Pasalugo, I don't know if you did, I don't think, but when they had the meeting with P&Z, did y'all have anything at that time? Did you bring it up to the folks?
I never knew that P&Z brought it up.
Okay.
As far as I know, I wasn't informed.
Okay.
This one I was.
No,
Okay.
my neighbors know.
Okay. If Mr. Sampson and Mr. Myers Y'all have any rebut, please?
So, yeah, I heard a couple of concerns, so if I forget one, you have to catch me before I step down. But first, the property value, we hear that a lot wherever we come into a new community that's growing, we hear that. And what we've done is, as far as pulling property value data, trying to think of similar communities to Hewitt that we have used that data in, Salina, Prosper, Forney, kind of communities that were smaller that are experiencing high growth like this area. And what we do is we go around and we've looked at the substations that we've built, particularly as they're aligned or their adjacency to commercial property and residential property. We have the same scenario that as far as in a neighborhood, all over the Metroplex, all over our service area. And what our data has shown over the last 10 years is that there isn't a correlation with property values and the adjacency to the substation. That's what we can, I mean, anyone can go look at that data. You can look up tax values. Everyone's got a county website. You can look at the home price increases in most areas in all these communities that are similar to theirs. That's the data that we have. We've explained that to not just you guys, but multiple cities throughout our service territory. So that's what I can give you as far as property value data. We just haven't seen the correlation and the decrease within Texas in our service area. It just isn't there in the numbers. And I guess, what else? So you mentioned moving it to another location. I understand there's plenty of open fields all over. We have to, just like anyone else, when we're going to look for property, in this case, we didn't have to look for property because we'd owned the property since, I don't know, is it the 80s maybe? So we've owned this property for decades now. But typically when we are looking for property, there's a couple things we have to keep in mind. One, we have to look for a willing property, or someone willing to sell their property. Just like anyone else, it's difficult. It's getting more difficult, as we know in Texas, just because of the growth, to buy property every day. We have to purchase property at a reasonable rate. At the end of the day, we have to answer to the PUC and the ratepayers. So we can't just, I know a lot of people think, oh, you can just go buy for whatever, but we can't. We have to be reasonable with the prices we're paying for property. But again, in this case, we already own the property. Second, we have to be located next to a transmission line, which in this case, it happens to go right across this neighborhood and this vacant piece of property. We can't locate, well, I shouldn't say we can't. We can, if we're over a certain distance from our transmission line, it is a much longer process. We have to go involve CCNs. It's much more expensive for the ratepayers. It's just a long process. And in the case when we're trying to meet high demand and load growth in an area like this, because it's growing so fast, it's much more beneficial to be located right next to a transmission line. Engineering-wise, it's also much more easy to be located right underneath one if we can. So that's what we look for. Trying to think. So those were two. Third, he had mentioned the satellite interference on his dish. That honestly would be a first. we get a lot of feedback from our customers, and it would be the first time I've heard someone say that they knocked out their, the Cowboys playing or something like that because they're next to a substation. So I could get information on that if that is a concern, but that would honestly be a first for me. I don't have a response back to that because it just isn't an issue that comes up or comes back to us. Are there anything, I guess what
Well,
else
before you
was
sit down, does council have any questions for Mr. Sampson? Yes, sir.
From what you said, I'm guessing that you own that property before that housing development went in.
So I just know when we own the property, I'm unsure, I don't know if Rob knows, but you guys would probably know better than us when that development was built. I assume it was, at least from the look of the neighborhood, it was within the 90s and newer, would be my assumption. I don't know when the neighborhood was built. 90s, yeah. So we have, and that's all information that's available. I the lady's name, but she had mentioned TXU, I think, maybe like tore up something.
AT&T.
Okay. AT&T, yeah, I have the same gripe with AT&T sometimes. But, you know, they are a different utility. What we have is, we have area managers in all of these communities. So if, you know, if you did have an issue like that with us, I would expect to hear from you relatively quickly. And, you know, we have people, we're stationed all over our service area. Like I said, we have area managers in every community just to address things like that. But, you know, we're very particular on how we treat the communities that we're in when we're doing construction. We try to maintain a good relationship with everyone. We're not out here to upset anyone with our construction. And other than that, you know, it's a safety concern if you don't address those type of construction site issues. Trying to think if there's another. The gentleman mentioned, and it sounds like he probably knows a lot more about electrical and engineering than I do. I'm not an engineer, but he had mentioned loose screw and stuff, you know, rattling off. And as far as safety goes, nowadays all of our substations are monitored 24/7. As far as safety goes, if there's ever an issue, they're shut down. They can isolate those stations immediately. So it's not like it's just something that. Hopefully something doesn't happen overnight and we get to it the next day. It's a 24/7 deal. They're constantly being monitored. The equipment nowadays is even, I mean, it's like any technology. It's just state of the art and it's continuing to improve. So that's obviously what a new station would be getting, is the newest equipment and technology that we have available to us.
Okay, anybody else?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned satellite, which I get, that's good to know also, but that's not, his question was all the other aerial stuff, the cell phone, his internet comes through the air, not through satellite, but through all the other sources. What kind of interference does it address that part of the statements he made as far as all the other stuff, not the satellite, but all the other that brings in his day-to-day stuff from?
Yeah, and our department hasn't ever experienced, you know, feedback as far as substation. I've heard people talk about transmission lines, they might cut out when they drive under them or something like that, or Sirius XM goes out when they drive past one of those, but I've never heard that concern, so that would be a first for me as far as substation blocking that type of interference, because again, the highest frequency at that location is gonna be those transmission lines. So that's, I mean, that would be a first. I've not heard of substation interfering with satellite, cell phone. So if that was the case, we would certainly expect the community or residents to reach out to us and look at what we could do to address that, but that would be a first for me.
Yes, sir. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I'm going to address a few things here. The very first thing I want to address, and Bo or Tracy, either one of y'all chime in on this. As far as notifying residents of the public hearings for the P&Z and everything, it's anybody within 200 feet of the property. So everybody on Briar Ridge should have received notification. I don't think anybody, but anybody in Sunflower Ridge had received notification. Okay, but, and so all those notices went out as required by law. Yes. And if I remember our conversation correctly, after the meeting last week, we had a couple that came back, or a few that maybe, one that came back, okay. So that's why not everybody finds out about these things, is because of did you want to say something, Mr. Thomas? Oh, okay. You know, they send out the notices based on that requirement of 200 feet. If you live within 200 feet of that and didn't get a notification, then we need to know about it. I guess if you're renting a property, that may be why somebody didn't get a notification that went to the property owners. The other thing I want to address is Ms. Pasalugo mentioned that she didn't feel the property values would go down, but the ability to sell may be impeded. And that is a different subject. Everybody here lately has been complaining about how their property values just keep going up and up and up and up. And while the valuations may not be directly impacted, the ability to sell, I think is probably a better concern, a more directed concern that I'm hearing, especially from Ms. Pasalugo, because she said it specifically. The one thing I have not heard from anybody is the benefit to the residents in and around Hewitt of this new substation. I can make assumptions, but assumptions, most people know what assume means, so we won't go there. Can you give us some idea of how that substation would benefit the residents of our city and surrounding cities?
Sure. First thing, and probably the most obvious to everyone, is reliability for the grid. Anywhere we see high growth, like this area is experiencing in the region, the addition of a substation is increased reliability, newer technology even from substations we were building 10 years ago, the technology's increased, so it gives us more options. In the case of an outage, it just gives us more abilities, more tools to get back, to get everything up and going again. It just gives us a lot more tools available to the community to be able to work those issues. Another one is economic drivers. A lot of our customers that come to us, the first thing they ask is, where are they going to get their electricity? They know they need a lot of power. Where's the closest substation? Those are large companies. I can't discuss those here, but you can probably figure it out if you did, if you needed to do some research. But large companies that move into the area, that's the first thing they ask us is when they reach out to us is, where's my closest substation? So it's an economic benefit to the community. It does increase reliability. And again, it's just an indicator of strong economic and population growth in regions.
Okay. So that transmission line runs down Old Temple Road, all the way down Old Temple Road to the interstate. Is that correct? You know better than I would. I'm not specifically on the transmission line side, but I do believe it. I know it runs north-south and then, yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think that's,
You sure?
yes.
You doing good here? Anything else?
Yeah, the only other thing that I would ask, if maybe, would our engineer be able to answer the question about the interferences, the EMI? He's shaking his head, so I won't go there. I do know what you're talking about. When I'm going down Old Temple Road to Sun Valley, my radio doesn't exactly work super good, and it's because of that big transmission lines. I've hit that before. I've hit the phone drops, but that's tied to a transmission line, not to a substation. So what we have is, what I'm seeing is we have a balance of concerns and benefits because I don't know how many of y'all were without power 2 years ago in the big freeze, but I was without power for a long time. And I was fortunate. I had a nicely insulated house and it only got down to 52. But I had no power. And if that were to hit us again, would this substation prevent that long of an outage?
So the substation isn't a generator. So the issues with why that happened was a generation issue. What it does do is, like you mentioned, when our crews come out and start, if we have technical failures online, stuff like that. It does give us more options that we may not have in this case right now. So it just gives us more options. It wouldn't solve the generation issue that we experience, but as far as cutting times in half, or not in half, but whatever it may be, and helping our technicians that come out, it is a benefit as far as that goes with the new technology and being able to help us out.
Okay, so the new technology, not only more reliable, but if I wrote it down here, would be better technology, makes it faster to get things going again after an outage.
I mean, it's just like, they're all computers.
Right.
It's just like anything, so it's, instantaneous in a lot of
Okay.
situations.
Okay. Now, anybody that spoke tonight, I would like to ask this. Did y'all get a notification? You wouldn't have, no.
For tonight, I did.
For,
I didn't get the other one.
not for the PNC? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that should have been on the same notification.
Oh, well, then I just did read it.
Because there's only one notification goes out, and it tells you about both meetings. So I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Mayor, I don't have anything else.
Any other folks have anything?
So really the only benefit then is just being able to zero it in faster and
As-
maybe jump on it quicker. That's a
You're,
good benefit.
you're referring to the storm?
Anything, whether it's a storm or whatever, an outage or something like that. That's really from what you kind of were saying, that's really the benefit
It's the benefit
to the
if.
Hewitt is.
Yeah, if
is
there's an outage, it's the benefit is the time, the technology, it just may give us more options in that case. It's almost like, I mean, there's probably a ton of analogies out there. It's almost like if there's a catastrophic event, would you rather have, one EMS crew or a hospital? You'd rather have a hospital. It just gives you more options, more, just ability to do what we need to do. But again, the benefits the entire community as a whole, again, economic-wise, just being able to serve the load that we anticipate for this region. And, I think the worst-case scenario is to get to a point where in a high-growth city, and you telling business that you can't supply them for a year or two. It's just an economic driver. So that I think, in my opinion, that's a huge benefit.
Okay.
Anybody else? Thank y'all very much.
Sure.
And offer a final rebuttal to those that may be speaking against, if you'll please approach the podium.
I'll say something.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to translate, because I've sat in on a lot of construction meetings. So what he's saying is, this is the most efficient route for them to take. They already own the land, and it's the cheapest way to go. It certainly isn't for us. And consider this, he said that it wouldn't affect property values. Would any of you move in next to one of these? It's common sense, and it's common knowledge. Okay? So it is going to affect us. And that transmission line runs all the way to the freeway. So it's not the only point of contact.
Mr. Lopez.
The other thing he said is a lot of the big companies that might want to come here want to know how close they are to the substation. That means that it would make a lot more sense to put it down there on I-35, in that area that's already blighted. I mean, what are you going to do? Move a pig slaughtering house next to us too?
Final rebuttal, yes, sir.
Well, I think Jeannie wants to say something.
I'm sorry. One moment, if you'd let Ms. Hasaluga speak.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
As a council, because I know, I watched 8 years of it, just because P and Z says you can do something, doesn't mean that you have to. There are alternative spots where this would not affect, and if it goes all the way up to 35, there's a lot of spots where you could go, and not on this corner. And it's known that high voltage wires and substations do cause mental, physical, and people diseases. It is known. And as a council, some of you new ones, you don't have to, if you don't think this is right, you need to not, but you need to vote no. Because I'm gonna tell you, if you put that substation there, you are gonna have a ton of really upset citizens. And and it won't be pretty. It won't be pretty. So, and I'm not threatening, it's a statement, I know. None of my neighbors know about it, but I assure you that if they find out, they will not be happy. They will not. Because we were without power for 10 days. And he's right. It isn't, it's not a transmission thing. They need to get something in place so that we keep our electricity. They still can't guarantee us our electricity. So that substation could be useless if it hasn't got power going through it. If it does have power going through it, it's useless to the people around here because the citizens, I can guarantee they're not gonna like it. I came here tonight to talk to Tracy about something and found out this is what's going on. The citizens in Hewitt do not know 9/10 of what's going on in this council. There's gotta be some way that we can get word out to people, just because it's gotta, to let people know what's going on and what's being done. And I'm not blaming that on you guys, but I'm just saying, you need to get some form of communication set up so that the people in Hewitt know more of what's going on.
Okay, first, again, I'll address the location of the property. It's, we have owned this property from decades, from the 80s, and we can get the exact date for that if you guys want, but anyone who's moving into that neighborhood, the developer who built that neighborhood, they can look up property information, see who owns the property. We've owned it for almost 40 years now. So when people bring up move it down, it's not that simple for us. We have to have explanations, and we have to, again, show the PUC that we're being diligent about the properties that we're using. Second, you mentioned growth along 35. Give it a couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised if we are back because of the way you guys are growing down in that area. It's the issue of when our load planners look at their maps, their computer analysis, they look at where our grid is, distribution, transmission, and they tell us, like, we need to be in this area. So it's not an arbitrary just, oh, this is easy, we already own the property. We have property other places. It's not just, these guys aren't gonna put up a fight. It's scientific, it's a formula that those load planners follow. So it's not as simple as just, oh, this is the path of least resistance. We know where we need to be in general, and that's the reason that it comes up in 2022. We look at our projects, we're like, okay, we need to be in this location to serve this area. So it's not just arbitrary. It's not something that little thought is put into. We know why we need to be there. I'm not sure if I'm missing another issue it sounded like the same issue as far as selling their houses. I mean, all we can look at is the data that's given to us and the data that's out there. And when we go into the communities that we have these stations in, it's not proving to be an issue selling homes. That's just what we're experiencing. We have these substations in, high density residential neighborhoods in Dallas. We have these stations in neighborhoods that are being built on the fringe of the Metroplex, on the fringe of Austin, all around Waco. So all I can speak towards is what we're seeing, and it has not been an issue. That's the best I can give you is with the data that we have and what we're seeing live on the ground. And there's communities just like Hewitt, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned a few of them previously that are very similar in size, footprint, economic, they're very similar communities, and we do these everywhere. It's just not data it just hasn't proven it in the numbers.
Is that data not, like, where y'all obviously own the property, so looking at it from a company, it's like we own the property, this would really be the best place to put it. So have they really looked around to see if it was moved down? I know you don't own the property now, but, I mean, that's the way, I would think that would be the best for you guys, especially to put it where your property already is.
Right, and we look at all the scenarios. You know, if we have to go find property, we do that. If we have property in the middle of where we see that load growth, we're going to use it. There's a reason we have the property. It's just like any other developer in Texas. You know, you're going to show up and you're going to want to use your property. But again, it's more growth and projection driven than it is we have this land. We purchase land all the time, all month long. So it's not a deterrent if we do have to purchase property. In this case, it's right in the middle of where we need to be.
Do you have anything for John? Okay. All right, thank you, y'all. And I'm gonna ask Mr. Thomas, Mr. Dixon, make sure we've met the rebuttal requirements on the back and forth we've had tonight. I think we're good.
I think we've
Okay.
done that.
All right, well, if nothing else, then for the public hearing on Resolution 2022-08 at 7:40 PM, we close the hearing. Before we go on to the motion and whatnot, Mr. Thomas, did you have anything else that you'd like to add?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right. At this time, I open the council for any additional comments or questions, and a movement to a motion, please. Make another request for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move to approve Resolution 2022-08, authorizing a special permit request by Kimley Horn for Encore TXU Electric Delivery Service Company for an electrical substation on the property known as Ocampo CA32, Track 1C2.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Potter. Do we have a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Stevens. We have a motion from Mr. Potter and a second from Mr. Stevens. At this time, I'll poll the council for a vote. All those in favor, show of hands, please. Dr. Bruce? Thank you. All those opposed? Okay. We have 6 for and 1 against. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next item up. All right, next item up is item number 4, is to conduct the second of 2 public hearings on 2022 tax rate. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. State of Texas tax code requires that a municipality hold a public hearing on the proposed tax rate at the meeting to adopt the tax rate. This will be the second public hearing, and the first one was last week. And with that, Mr. Mayor, members of council, it'd be appropriate to open the public hearing to hear comments for, against, or questions regarding property tax.
Thank you. All right, 7:43, open the second of 2 public hearings on the 2022 tax rate. This time I call anybody that would like to speak for the agenda item number 4. Nobody coming for, anybody against? Nobody speaking for or against. At this time, at 7:43, we close the agenda item number 4. All right, there's no action on this. Next item is number 5, is consider approval of the minutes of the council workshop regular meeting of August the 1st, 2022, and special call meeting, council meeting of August the 8th, 2022. I'll call for any corrections or amendment to a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Turner.
I move approval of the minutes as presented, but allow for any corrections.
We have a motion for Mr. Turner. Call for a second, please.
Second.
Mr. Potter. We have a motion for Mr. Turner and a second for Mr. Potter. At this time, I'll poll the council for their vote. A show of hands, all those in favor, please. Dr. Bruce. All right, the motion carries 7-0. All right, next item, number 6. Is discussion and possible action on an ordinance number 2022-10, accepting the 2022 certified tax roll. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. In your packet this evening, for your consideration and approving ordinance number 2022-10, you have a certification of the 2022 appraisal roll from the Clinton County Appraisal District, signed by Chief Appraiser, Mr. Joe Don. You also have in your packet this evening the total certified values, prepared on page 26 for you, in short-term assessed value of just over $1.625 billion. Also provides you a breakdown on tax exemptions, which gives you a net taxable value of just over $1.3 billion. With that, Mr. Mayor, members of council, be happy to answer any questions you have regarding ordinance number 2022-10, an ordinance of the city of Hewitt, Texas, accepting and approving the tax roll of the city of Hewitt and declaring an effective date. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, before we move to the motion, I'll call on council. Any questions or comments on the item? Okay. At this time, I will call for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Stevens?
I move to approve ordinance number 2022-10, accepting the 2022 certified tax roll.
Thank you. We have a motion, Mr. Stevens. I call for a second, please.
I'll second.
I'm sorry. Mr.
Second.
Price? We have a motion from Mr. Stevens and a second from Mr. Price. What we're going to do in the next few items is we're going to, Lydia, if you'll help, if you'll call, individual call the vote on this, please.
Price.
Aye.
Mr. Potter?
Yes.
Dr. Bruce?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Van Kelly?
Yes.
Fortner?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, the motion carries 7-0. And I believe this, number 10 goes to number 7, is that right?
That's
We're going
right.
to move the order of the, okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So we're going to number 10. Dr. Bruce, did you hear we're on 10 now? Okay. We good? All right, this time, discussion and action on ordinance number 2022-12, adopting the fiscal year 2022-2023 annual operating and capital budget. I'll open it to council for any discussion and a movement to a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes,
move
sir.
to approve the ordinance number 2022-12, adopting the FY 2022-2023 annual operating and capital budget.
Thank you. Call for a second. Mr. Potter, we have a motion.
Second.
Mr. Turner. We have a motion from Mr. Potter and a second from Mr. Turner. I'll also ask Lydia if you would please poll the council for their vote.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Turner?
Yes.
Potter?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes, ma'am.
Price,
Yes.
Van Kelly,
Yes.
Bordenberry.
Yes, ma'am. At this time, we have unanimous on this, the motion carries. Next item, which is noted as number 7, is the discussion and action on ordinance number 2022-11, adopting the 2022 tax rate of .540102. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The budget that you have just adopted was prepared with this particular tax rate at .540102. There will be several things from this point forward that may seem a little different, but statutorily, they are requirements for the council to perform. First is, in your packet this evening, I believe you have a copy of the notice that was printed in the Waco Tribune Herald, indicating that your intentions were to contemplate this particular tax rate, also as well as identify public hearing dates and that particular tax rate. You adopted this tax rate for approval of purposes of notification. Tax rate that you adopt can be this tax rate, can't be any higher, it can be lesser, but it can't be any higher. Also in your packet this evening, regarding that adoption, you had a letter from Mr. Randy Riggs, tax assessor collector, that outlines several of these items that we will be going through this evening, but a lot of this hinges around the fact that the tax rate that's being contemplated for you to adopt is greater than the no new revenue rate, or what used to be called the effective tax rate, but it is lesser than the voter approval rate. Also in that letter, you will see a breakdown of the total certified taxable values, the taxable value of new improvements, the anticipated collection rate, the new revenue tax rate, the voter approval rate, as well as the de minimis rate. And then you will notice that when you've adopted the tax rate for your unit, or for Hewitt, please write that rate in the space provided below. And it talks about we, the governing body of the city of Hewitt, have adopted the following tax rate of 2022. Breaks that out in an O&M tax rate as well as an INS tax rate for a total. With that, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. The one thing that if council were to consider changing the tax rate this evening, the INS rate would need to remain the same based upon the issuance of the certificate of obligation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, this time, open to council for any questions, comments, and a call for a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Van Kelly.
this is a comment, and I know by law, we have to say it's a property tax rate increase. But we didn't change the rate. That's correct.
That's correct, yes, sir.
So our property tax rate that was set at .540102 years ago has remained the same, although the property values have increased, even though that in the motion it will say property tax rate increased by 10.4%. So it's words that are, in my opinion, misleading because we did not change the rate itself. It's unfortunate that only one resident remained to hear me say that, and just the people watching will hear that. But what they're gonna hear is you would increase their property tax rate by 10.4%. And, but I want it made clear that we did not increase our rate. Back to you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Could Mayor Pro
Yes, sir.
Tem Van Callen. If you also look in your packet on page, bottom right-hand corner, page 28, you have a copy of the ordinance 2022-11. And it reads, an ordinance of the city of Hewitt, Texas, adopting the tax rate and levying the ad valorem taxes for the fiscal year 22-23 on all taxable property within and subject to taxation within the city as of January 1st, 2022, to provide revenues for the payment of current expenditures and debt service, providing for the repeal of all ordinances in conflict, and providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. If you go down in the ordinance there towards, once you get past section 1, it outlines exactly the issue that we're talking about. It says this tax rate will raise more taxes for maintenance and operation than last year's tax rate. The tax rate will effectively be raised, and that's the key word, effectively, because it's talking about a rate in comparison to the old effective tax rate, or what we call now the no new revenue rate, by 10.4%. It will raise taxes for maintenance and operations on a $100,000 home by approximately $11.62. I just wanted to point that out, get that in the record, because the tax rate, if council adopts the tax rate this evening, it's the same tax rate that we currently have.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Thank you. Continue on with the motion, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. McKelly.
I move approval of ordinance 2022-11, adopting the 2022 tax rate of .540102, which by adoption increases the property tax rate by 10.4%.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Van Callen. Call for a second, please.
Second.
Mr. Stevens. We have a motion from Mr. Van Callen and a second from Mr. Stevens on ordinance number 2022-11. At this time, Lindy, if you could please poll the council for the vote.
Potter,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Price,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Van Callen,
Yes,
Gordon Ritter.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The motion carries 7-0. All right, finish on the print, item number 7. Going on to bird number 8 is discussion and action on resolution number 2022-09, adopting the updated master fee schedule. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council. The master fee schedule has been a part of your proposed budget, as well as the possibility of any deliberations on that. We didn't really spend a lot of time on talking about any of the master fee schedule, but it is something that you adopt on an annual basis in conjunction with the budget. You adopt those by resolution. I kept in here and placed in your packet another Hewitt master fee schedule. And if I can get you to go to, I believe, page 40 in the bottom right-hand corner. From here, from this point forward, you will see highlighted numbers. Those are the numbers that have been changed in this upcoming fee schedule. And to kind of give you a relationship, the hourly rental on the amphitheater, we're talking about with this new rate, reducing that by the hour of $50. We're reducing the refundable deposit by $125. You go down to field rental, that is actually being increased by $5. And then pavilion rentals are the refundable park pavilion for Hewitt and deposit, because we had not had a deposit for pavilion rental. We're asking for that now at $40, and then you have the other two park pavilion fees that are roughly $5 in difference. Go one more page, page 41. is the remainder of the fee changes you will find in the water and wastewater section. These mirror what was in the Wildan study for the second increase based upon the cost of service study. The only revenue that has been accounted in the budget that's been adopted is the $1 base charge that you have actually set forward. In October, the rates on anything volumetric that's in this particular master fee schedule will be coming back to you for deliberation prior to being instituted for a potential December 1st effective date. If I didn't make that sound right, I'll try again. The only change, even though you see all these changes highlighted here on the water and wastewater side, the only change that's been accounted for in the upcoming budget by way of that particular adopted budget is the $1 base charge for water and sewer. Everything else, in terms of the volumetric charges, still will need future deliberation by the council based upon your request at the initial time you adopted those rate increases. Thank you.
So,
I have one question,
yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Thomas, on page 40, the field rental, is that practice field behind Hewitt Park Pavilion area that's open back there till you get to the walking track?
Yes, sir.
And is that the only field this references? Is there one now in Warren Park? Because I haven't been out there in a little bit, so.
There's not a field in Warren Park.
It's only the one in Hewitt Park.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Yes, sir. Thank you, the council. Anybody else have any questions or comments? At this time, for item number 8, movement to a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Stevens.
I move to approve resolution number 2022-09, adopting the updated master fee schedule.
Thank you. We have a motion for Mr. Stevens. Call for a second, please.
Second.
Mr. Turner. We have a motion for Mr. Stevens and a second for Mr. Turner. Lydia, again, if you could help us on calling the roll, please. Excuse me, the vote.
Judge Bruce,
Yes, ma'am.
Price,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Potter,
Yes.
Van Gelder,
Yes.
Fortenberry.
Yes, ma'am. Motion carries 7-0. Next item up, number 9, is discussion and action on ratification of the property tax increase reflected in the budget. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The local government code, in the municipal budget section, requires the governing body to ratify the property tax increase reflected in the budget. So now that you have adopted the budget and you have adopted the tax rate, now you get to come back and say, we realize what we did. And that's exactly what, this particular ratification is for. With that, Mr. Mayor and members of council, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions for you.
Before we move to a motion, does anybody have any questions or comments? At this time, I call for a motion on item number 9.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Ben Kelly.
I move to ratify the property tax increase reflected in the budget.
Thank you. Motion for Mr. Ben Kelly. Call for a second, please.
Second.
Mr. Potter. We have a motion for Mr. Ben Kelly and a second for Mr. Potter. Lydia, if you would please help us on polling the council, please.
Price,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Potter,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes, ma'am.
Van Kelly,
Yes.
Fortenberry.
Yes, ma'am. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Our next item 10 we've done. On to number 11. It is a briefing and discussion concerning financial statements ending July the 31st, 2020. Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the only thing here is the financial statements ending July 31st were sent out on August 5th to each of you electronically. This is just that monthly opportunity to ask any questions that you may have regarding the monthly financials. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Council have any questions or comments? All right, there's no action required. We'll move on to the next item, number 12. Is the discussion and action to ratify the expenditure of $102,036 for the emergency repair of the Macklemore well pump, motor, and other equipment at plant number 2 to Jurgensen Pump LLC. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I guess maybe about the last time we got some real rain. It was around June 3rd, 2022. And that was the day that Macklemore well also went down. With being the time of year it is and that type of thing, we treated the repair as an emergency, like we have on any of our water well that go down. We do have, we think, the possibility of understanding that with, after the diagnosis of a lot of those items being pulled, being the well pump and the motor, and some other materials, Jurgensen Pump feels like we may be able to file a claim and have, because it appears that potentially we received some lightning damage at that particular well. But in the meantime, as you can tell from the invoices that are attached in your packet, Kevin spent a lot of money. I'm just kidding. We spent $102,036 with Jurgensen Pump, getting that well back up and operational. With that, Mr. Mayor, members of council, be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Just all these emergency expenditures would bring these back for your ratification, mainly so that you know what we've done.
Okay, thank you. Over to council before we move on to a motion. Any comments or questions on this? Yes, sir. All right. Did I hear something down here? No? Okay. All right, at this time, open for discussion and then on motion, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
I
Potter.
move to ratify the expenditure in the amount of $102,036 to Jurgensen Pump LLC for repairs at plant number 2, Macklemore well.
Thank you. We have a motion for Mr. Potter. A call for a second, please.
Second.
Mr. Price. We have a motion for Mr. Potter and a second for Mr. Price. This time I'll poll the council. All in favor, please have a show of hands. Thank you. Motion carries 7-0. Are we there?
Mayor, before you adjourn.
Yes, sir.
One quick little announcement. Unless it breaks anybody's heart. I know we've been 3 times this month. It's pretty regular, but the next city council meeting would be scheduled to fall on the Labor Day holiday. After visiting with staff and that type of thing, we think we can hold out, if you can, until September 19th to our next meeting. That'd be all right with everybody.
don't know
Miss
about-
that first one in September.
I think so. Everybody agree to that? Get thumbs up, everyone. All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else for adjournment, open for a motion, please.
Make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Price, did you feel that?
I felt it.
All right, we have a motion for Mr. Price. Call for a second, please.
Second.
Is that Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Turner. We have a motion for Mr. Price, under duration, hard pushing and thinking. Second, Mr. Turner, this time, show of hands for all those in favor. Everybody? Mr. McCallum? Okay, all right. We have a motion carries 7-0. Thank y'all very much. It's over at 8:09.
Question.